So again today we got to hear from the book of Job. The book of Job is one of my favorite books in the Bible. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I'm sure y'all love it as much as I do. I can tell you that those who've dealt with tremendous loss, those who are dealing with grief, can find tremendous comfort within the pages of the book of Job if they know how to look for it. Now, we talked 2 weeks ago about the question that the book seeks to answer. Why do bad things happen to good people? We said that the prologue of the book does not answer that question. The prologue is the setup. We know that both God and the adversary know that Job is without sin. So what happens to Job is not his fault. If there's anything theological to take away from the prologue, it is this. The adversary believes that humans are only in a relationship with God for what they can get. God trusts that Job and that all believers are in relationship with God out of love. Now, our lectionary cycle just gives us little snippets from this amazing book, and it tells a particular kind of story about it, but that story looks radically different if we look at what we've seen, but also all that we have missed. Today's story begins with Job, who's lost everything that matters to him. Yet, even as he sits in an ash pit covered with sores, Job does not curse God. Rather, he sits in silence with his pain. And most importantly for Job, his 3 good friends come and sit with him. They sit with him in silence. They don't try to make him feel better. They don't try to tell him he should get up and take a shower. No, they sit with him in silence. They are wise enough to just stay with him so that he's not alone in the darkness. They are wise enough to do that for 7 days. After 7 days, Job, his pain bursts out of him, and his friends are unable to handle hearing what he has to say. So they start talking at him instead of listening. They use the language of the theology that they all share. They talk of an ordered universe where tragedy is caused by something, caused by human sin. Job knows that he's done nothing to deserve these tragedies, but his friends know that bad things do not happen to good people. So they try to help Job discover what his sin has been. They spend time pointing out all of the things that Job could have done to anger God. For some reason, they think this might be comforting. I know it would not help me. After each series of arguments, Job again reiterates he has done nothing wrong. So finally, after chapters and chapters of this, Job demands that God tell him what he's done. If God has given him this punishment, well, then he deserves to know why. Now, only those who do not know this book can talk about someone having the patience of Job. Far from being patient, Job tells God exactly how he feels about him. He starts out thinking that maybe arguing with God is impossible, but as he builds his case, like any good defense lawyer, Job realizes that God does indeed owe him an answer. So he tells the God of justice that he's been unjust, that Job has held up his end of the bargain, and God owes him an explanation for why God has dropped the ball on his part. Note, please, that Job, as Ellen Davis writes, rails against God not as a skeptic, not as an enemy, but as a firm believer. And once Job has his argument fully worked out and fully delivered, Job is silent once again. He's put his argument before God, and now he sits and waits. And God shows up. God appears in a whirlwind and speaks to Job. For several chapters, God speaks directly to Job. And in all of that time, God does not answer Job's accusations, nor does God give an answer to the original question of why do bad things happen to good people. God's speech begins with what we just heard a few moments ago. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the heavenly beings shout for joy? Well, if you stop there, God sounds kind of snarky, doesn't he? Some people think that's God's intention, actually, to make Job feel insignificant. God spouting off about all this tremendous power and going on and on about things that are completely unconnected to Job's pain. In this way of thinking, at the end of the book, Job just gives up and gives in to God just to get him to shut up. I don't see it that way. I hear God in these verses telling Job about all the wonders of creation, things that are bigger and more profound than Job can even know. God speaks of making it rain in the wilderness, even if no one is there to see it. God speaks of the frolicking of the mountain goat, the sturdiness of the wild ox, the ostrich, I think the silliest creature ever invented, but God also speaks of Behemoth, a great land monster, and Leviathan, a great sea monster, both things that terrify human beings, but animals that God made just for the fun of it. Over and over, God talks about creation. Creation that is wild and chaotic, and how God delights in all of these things. All of these things in creation that cannot be controlled. And humanity is another uncontrollable thing that God has created. Towards the end of his speech, God says this to Job: "Unleash your raging anger. Look on all the proud and humble. Look on all the proud and debase them. Trample the wicked in their place. Hide them together in the dust. Bind their faces in a hidden place. If you can, then I, even I, will praise you." God will praise Job if Job can control humans, who are as wild and wondrous and unpredictable as is all of creation, that creation that God makes and delights in. God tells Job that the world he created is neither ordered nor predictable. God is not some sober and righteous judge who punishes and rewards human beings. God is one who delights in wonder, in unpredictable creatures, in the beauty of creation. Voltaire once said that God is a comedian playing to an audience that is afraid to laugh. That's the God that appears to Job out of the wilderness, completely unpredictable and completely in love with all that has been created, including Job, including each one of us. Please don't misunderstand me here. God is not delighted by our suffering. Neither does God cause our suffering. We live in a world that God created and that humans continue to help build. And in this world in which we live, horrible things happen, and we cannot always control them. And God stands with us in the midst of it all. The book of Job, while it starts out with a why question, actually ends up going in a completely different direction. In actuality, the book of Job is all about human pain and how out of the deepest pain imaginable, Job learns to speak accurately about God. In Job's darkest moments, he brought his pain and his anger to his Creator, and God showed up. Not in the way Job intended, not giving the answer that Job wanted. However, the God who had the power to create unimaginable things, that God cares enough to come to one human being when he cries out. And that same God cares enough to come to each one of us when we call. Probably not in a whirlwind. Definitely not in the way we want. Usually not in the way we ask. And not answering the question of why something has happened. But God is sitting with us in the ash pit. God is walking with us in the darkness. Even if we cannot see or feel God's presence, God is there. And God is with us until that journey takes us back towards and then back into the light. Our journey through life's darkness changes us, as Job was changed by his own journey. For at the end of Job's story, tune in next week to hear how it all ends up. But in the meantime, when you want to understand God, look at an ostrich, or a storm, or a squirrel, or a tree, or into a mirror. Look and wonder. In the name of the Holy God.